and welcome to this special event on directing funding where it matters, financing national and local stakeholders for actions to halt deforestation and implement sustainable forestry. Thank you for joining, for those of you who are here and also the ones who are connecting virtually. My name is Marco Boscolo. I am a forestry officer here in FAO, and I will be moderating this event together with my colleague Lucio Santos, who's also there. So let me start by saying, why are we having this event? We heard throughout COFO discussions that small producers, their organizations, indigenous people, local community, small and medium enterprises are crucial actors to mitigate climate change, to protect forests, to manage them sustainably, to restore landscapes, and to ensure food security for millions of rural people. And yet, it is fair to say that they struggle to access finance that is adequate to their needs. Adequate in terms of amounts, and also adequate in terms of the modality, with financing instruments and products that are suitable for their needs. And with these special events, we would like to share some of the latest developments, opportunities, and also continuing challenges these stakeholders have to improve access to finance and make agri-food systems, including forestry, more inclusive and more sustainable. Now, for this task, we have an impressive set of speakers that can help us flesh out this topic. And you can see them here on the screen. And before, I also want to acknowledge the Mesoamerican Alliance for People and Forests, which have helped us conceptualize and also organize these events. Before I invite the first speaker, let me say that this session will be organized in two segments. The first one, we will have individual presentations, which I have invited all speakers to be very brief. You have maximum 6 minutes to make your points. And then there will be a second part, a panel discussions with Q&A that will be moderated by Lucio Santos. I also want to say the event is being registered, and so if any speakers have a problem with FAO using any of the registration, please tell me afterwards. So without further ado, let me invite here Serena Fortuna, who is the team leader of the Red Plus team here in FAO, to give us her welcome and opening. Serena.
Thank you very much, Marco. And thank you very much to all of you who are here today. It is my big pleasure to host and welcome our distinguished panelists here with us here on the stage, but also all of you who are here in the Red Room with us in FAO today, and all the persons also that are following us with the recording in the future. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all. I'd like to then here kind of officially give the official opening of the directing funding where it matters, financing national and local stakeholders for action to halt deforestation, to implement sustainable forestry. This is on behalf of Tina Vahanen, the Deputy Director of the Forestry Division here in FAO, who had to be called in the COFO continuation of the sessions. As you know, those are continuing just now. In this post-COVID era, FAO and its strategic framework 2022-2031, together with its partners, of course, is really committed to support countries in building back better for a greener, more sustainable, and more resilient economies. FAO, of course, recognizes the importance to achieve better production, better environment, and better livelihood, including addressing climate change and a better life for all. Of course, forests play a key role in achieving these ambitions. However, it is also important to remember that finding the right balance between sustainable development, economy, agriculture, and forestry is a huge challenge. In fact, despite the recognition of this important role, and although at a slower rate, deforestation still continues. With an annual rate of deforestation of approximately 10 million hectares per year, for the period 2015-2020. Those by now are very renowned data. What is important to discuss here is that finance to address this challenge remains still insufficient, undermining therefore the achievement of the important commitment of sustainable development, of halting forest loss, as well as combating climate change. Scaled up levels of finance and investments are therefore urgently needed to protect, to manage, to restore forests, so that they can really play their role and fully contribute to counter the important challenges posed by climate change, food insecurity, biodiversity loss, and persistent poverty and inequality. Of course, to achieve this important target of scaling up finance, it is really crucial for all sorts of funding, both public domestic funds and official development assistance, as well as private funds, to get together and really act as one. Also, all funding modalities, including REP+, results-based finance, carbon finance, will need to be mobilized. In FAO, one of the program priority areas focuses on scaling up investments. Such program area aims to increase both the scale but also the quality of the investment in forestry, to therefore finance the transformation and the transition from unsustainable practices, both in the forestry sector, agriculture sector, land use sectors, towards economies that attract and scale up sustainable practices. Halting deforestation, and it's been discussed in different arenas, is a highly complex issue, and it scale up from complex interactions among global and local factors. That's why also the importance here to call in for multiple dimensional responses, joining efforts among different key stakeholders from national level governments to private sector, local communities, indigenous people, and farmers. A number of recent publications has also highlighted this importance, ranging from the latest State of the World Forest 2022, but also at the latest World Forestry Congress, for those of you who had the chance to participate or watching the recording. The key role that indigenous people, local communities, and local and small farmers play to protect and restore forests and support sustainable forest value chains has been highlighted tremendously. Yet, as Marco was mentioning before, their ability to really improve and scale up actions is greatly impaired by the difficulties they encounter to access finance. Just as a reference, in 2019, just 1.7% of the climate finance really reached local producers and communities in the rural forest-based activities. So, for example, when thinking about REP+ in the countries also, and REP+ result-based payments in the countries, it's so crucial to work at just and fair benefit sharing mechanism. Going towards the conclusion here, also important to stress that just last week in Vietnam, an international conference on saving our future, investing in locally led diversification for climate resilience and food security, really showcased the multiple ways where local communities, farmers, indigenous people can act as primary agent and delivering forest and landscape restoration, transformation, and recovery from COVID-19. Let me conclude here that facilitating exchange and evidences on good practices from innovation, finance, and investment models to reduce deforestation, enhance restoration, and increase the sustainable forest is essential, and has been also encouraged by at different COFO sessions. So here we're really delighted to have eminent speakers that will walk us through these different points. And with that, I really thank you for your attention, and I wish you a successful exchange. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you very much, Serena, for highlighting the relevance of this event for FAO's vision and work, and for providing also a context for why it is so important. We have now as a next speaker, I see him on the screen, Duncan McQueen, who joins us from the UK. welcome Duncan. Duncan is a team leader on forests at the International Institute for Environment and Development, and he's going to help us understand why it is important to have financing models that are appropriate to the local level. Duncan, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Marco, and I hope you can see my screen as well.
Yes, we can.
It's a great pleasure to be here to talk about this, and I'm going to really try and give an introductory remarks about why it's important to get finance locally, and some of the experiences that we've developed from the Forest and Farm Facility, which is really led by forest and farm producer organizations and Indigenous peoples organizations. So smallholders are vital to solve global challenges, and they are for a number of reasons. They have collective strength in numbers. In terms of income, they're not, while individually small, they're enormously important globally. So estimates put them at $0.8 to $1.5 trillion of production annually. In terms of food security, although small in farm size, smaller farm sizes we now know have greater average productivity. So they produce 30 to 34% of global food supply on just 24% of the area. And that's much higher in regions where smallholder farmers predominate. In terms of biodiversity, we know that smaller farm sizes equate to greater agrobiodiversity. So another reason for switching production towards smallholders. And finally, smallholders control a great deal of the world's remaining natural forests and much of the world's degraded land. When you think of finance, it's often confused with investment. And I think it's important to note that investment, smallholder farmers are investing a lot in solving global problems. They're investing their land, they're investing their labor, they're investing their enterprise. They also have some capital to invest, but in order to attract external capital, asset investment, we need enabling investments that help them secure their tenure, build their technical skills, support their business development, and crucially, strengthen their organizations so that they can achieve a scale of production that's attractive to external investors. We know from past studies that the enabling investment that they need is not really reaching them. Only 1.7% of climate finance is actually reaching the local level to enable them to secure tenure, develop sort of technical skills, business support, and organization. But when we look at the asset investment, which is money that it expects a return, we see that there's also a big gap. And that's because at the micro level, predictable farming cycles make it easy for microcredit to lend to farmers. At the large scale end, where there are professionalized corporate type structures, bank finance kicks in. But in the middle, there's a missing section, and that's where we need to focus our attention by strengthening the organizations and track record, embedding incubation, business incubation within those organizations, and facilitating de-risking. The other important thing to remember is that finance doesn't just come from banks, it comes from many different sources. And if we want to solve global problems of climate and nature, we have to align a whole range of different sources of finances in support of local organizations. So these include the money generated by producers themselves, the profits that they generate from selling product, critically trade and buyer finance people who want a supply of product and are prepared to invest to get it. And aligning those sorts of finance sources with climate and development funds, attracting in the bank finance and putting more emphasis on national public finance supplying their needs. So just one example, we've been to Vietnam, a big exchange with 31 countries, forest and farm leaders talking about how to do this. This is a cooperative, the Cinnamon and Star Anise Cooperative in Vietnam. When we started working here in 2014, there were 4 collective groups of cinnamon tree growers selling at fairly minimal prices to traders. They mobilized themselves after training in the benefits of organization to form a cooperative which could put up some capital to invest in a processing facility, but they didn't have all the capital they needed. So in addition, they partnered with a buyer, Vin Samex, and that company put in the additional finance they needed so they could attract bank finance in order to build a processing facility. That's advanced enormously over the last 4 years and is now one of the leading cinnamon, star anise and spice producers in Vietnam. So it's aligning and blending different sorts of finance and keeping the emphasis firmly on unleashing the potential of local producers and their organizations. That's
Duncan, if you can ask you to just close in the last few seconds, what are the key points, if you have anything else to add to here? Or was this
no, that's me done.
Okay, excellent. Okay, fantastic. Well, Duncan, thank you so much for this very informative presentation and setting the stage for this, highlighting that we have an inclusion issue when we comes to accessing capital, and that small producers actually are already investing quite a lot. I think that is an important message that needs to come across. The next speaker is Gustavo Sanchez. I don't know if we have Gustavo connected. Excellent. Gustavo Sanchez is joining us from Mexico. Bienvenido, Gustavo. It is 4 o'clock in the morning for Gustavo there. Gustavo is the president of the Executive Council of the Mesoamerican Alliance of People and Forests. And he will tell us about how indigenous and community organizations are organizing, designing, and implementing their own financing mechanism. Gustavo, bienvenido. Tiene la palabra, por favor.
Gracias, Marco. Entiendo que va a ser una interpretación secuenciada y agradezco mucho a Francisca Felicani por este apoyo.
Sí, gracias, Gustavo. Exactamente. Hay una interpretación secuenciada, como tú dices.
Voy a presentar los avances que tenemos en un mecanismo que se llama Fondo Territorial Mesoamericano. Este es un mecanismo de financiamiento alternativo manejado directamente por pueblos indígenas y comunidades locales, quienes viven y sostienen los últimos grandes bosques y territorios naturales en 6 países de Mesoamérica. Esta es una iniciativa de la Alianza Mesoamericana de Pueblos y Bosques, formada por 11 organizaciones de pueblos indígenas y comunidades locales. Queremos destacar que estamos en 6 países de esta región comprendida entre México y Panamá, y una de las características principales de esta asociación o de esta plataforma de coordinación de organizaciones es que hemos superado las diferencias que hay entre pueblos indígenas y comunidades locales y somos una organización única que combina la participación de estos 2 sectores. Hasta ahí dejo voy a hacer una pausa para la interpretación.
Sí, por favor, Francesca.
Thank you, Gustavo. So Mr. Gustavo is actually presenting the progresses is made on the Territorial Mesoamerican Fund. This fund is actually an alternative financial mechanism managed directly by indigenous peoples and local communities who live and sustain the last graced forests and natural territories in 6 countries of Mesoamerica. So the initiative of the Mesoamerican Alliance of Peoples and Forests is actually formed by 11 indigenous and local communities organizations. So they actually operate across 6 countries from the Mesoamerican region, who are Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, and Panama. And they manage also to cross the gap and to make indigenous peoples and local communities work together.
Gustavo.
Bien, un estudio de la Fundación Rainforest Noruega en 2021 confirmó algo que ya percibíamos, que muy poco financiamiento estaba llegando a los territorios. Este estudio encontró que de todo el dinero invertido en financiamiento climático en una década, en la década pasada, solo el 1% estaba llegando a los territorios comunitarios.
So a study...
Bien notado.
Oh, sorry.
Sí, Francesca.
A study produced by the Rainforest Foundation from Norway, produced in 2021, actually confirmed that less than 1% of the global climate finance reached indigenous peoples and local communities in the global south in the last 10 years.
Nosotros, las organizaciones que participamos en la Alianza Mesoamericana de Pueblos y Bosques, tenemos un diagnóstico del actual modelo de financiamiento climático. No voy a señalar todos los elementos de este diagnóstico, solo voy a destacar que estamos convencidos de que este modelo de financiamiento climático ha sido diseñado por los gobiernos, pensando en otros gobiernos y algunas organizaciones muy grandes. No está diseñado precisamente para que las comunidades accedan al financiamiento directamente o a través de sus organizaciones. Creemos que se enfoca demasiado en reducir emisiones y no ve otros aspectos, además de que es costoso y no toma en cuenta las prioridades de las comunidades. Adelante, Francisca.
Thank you. So the current climate finance model actually fails to invest in community territories and protect forests, mainly because it has been designed by and for governments and some organizations. It focuses almost exclusively on reducing emissions. It is very costly and bureaucratic financial flow channels. It does not take into account the organizational initiatives that already exist in the territories, and the respect for rights is rarely applied.
Gracias. Este es un esquema a partir de cómo percibimos que se aplicó el financiamiento de red en la pasada década. Sentimos que tenía objetivos múltiples, es decir, pretendía el financiamiento apoyar a gobiernos, apoyar a organizaciones, apoyar en territorios. Entonces, había una gran dispersión de los recursos, además de que existían demasiados puntos de intermediación. En cada punto de intermediación se iba quedando una parte del recurso Entonces, esto ocasionó que menos del 10% llegara a los territorios. Además, una cuestión muy importante para nosotros es que no necesariamente existía participación plena y efectiva de pueblos indígenas y comunidades locales, y muchas veces las prioridades de estos pueblos y comunidades no eran atendidas. Adelante, Francisca, por favor.
So we're now showing actually the current design of the REPLUS financial flow channels. As we can see, the main actually recipients are often multilateral organizations and governments, but most of the time there are multiple objectives which actually as a consequence contribute to the dispersion of the resources. Some studies confirm actually that only less than 10% of those financial flows effectively reach the territories, and there's not always full and effective participation of them in the processes, in the sense that the priorities are not always decided by the communities.
Gracias. Partiendo de ese diagnóstico, impulsamos un proyecto piloto para tener nuestro propio modelo de financiamiento climático a partir de una donación de CLUA de $600,000 en el periodo 2020-2021, es decir, en plena pandemia. Se hizo una convocatoria para atender a 10 organizaciones, 10 proyectos en estos países, México, Guatemala, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Honduras y Panamá, en 3 líneas de acción decididas por las propias organizaciones comunitarias. La primera línea es fortalecimiento de la gobernanza, la segunda línea es fortalecimiento de derechos y la tercera es iniciativas económicas y productivas. Para nosotros es tan importante la gobernanza y los derechos como las iniciativas económicas. Adelante, Francisco.
So based on the result of that diagnostic, what we did was to develop our proper climate financial model. And as we stand now is the pilot phase. So we had an initial, we can count with an initial donation of $600,000. And we are using it for actually encouraging and supporting 10 projects across Mexico, Guatemala, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Honduras, and Panama. Projects that are actually mainly developed by indigenous organizations and local communities. The line of actions defined by those organizations are mainly aiming to strengthen the organization's governance of those entities, to strengthen also and protect the territorial rights, and strengthen forest governance at local level, and finally also to enhance local economic and productive initiatives.
Así, en contraposición al modelo de financiamiento que se utilizó en red, estamos tratando de construir un mecanismo de financiamiento con solo un punto de intermediación que nos permita bajar costos, fortalecer derechos, fortalecer gobernanza, atender las prioridades de las propias organizaciones, pero sin sacrificar eficiencia en el uso de recursos y transparencia. Adelante, por favor.
So what we did was to create and develop our own territorial investment piloting program, aiming to reduce the number of intermediaries, to reduce the costs, improve governance, strengthen rights and territorial governance, ensure investment efficiency and transparency, and enhance the local organizations' capacity also in terms of prioritizing the investments.
So, Gustavo, I think I need to interrupt here because in the interest of time, we need to move on to the next speaker. Maybe you have additional points that you can make during the panel discussion. Gustavo, lo siento mucho, pero no tenemos más tiempo para terminar tus puntos. Tal vez en la fase de discusión con el panel puedes completar tus otros puntos. I think you have made very good points about the challenges that Indigenous people and local communities face, and that there are direct initiatives that are already being taken place to strengthen the governance, the rights, and economic ventures of these groups that need to be further supported. Let me move on to the next speaker, which is Rob Boesing, who is a senior policy advisor with the Ministry of Agriculture, Nature and Food Quality of the Netherlands, who's going to talk about the role of producer organizations in integrating forestry and agriculture and lessons learned from initiatives to support them. Rob, you have the floor. I think so.
Well, good morning, everybody. I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting me. Well, I'm waiting for the... Yes. That's the title of my presentation, and the title suggests that I will speak for the next hour. But as you have already heard, my intention is to tell you within 6 minutes why I put this title, why they are related, and what could happen when we do nothing, and what we should do, and possibly how. Next one, please. During COFO 23 in 2016, the title of COFO of the State of the World Forest 2016 was Forest and Agriculture, Land Use Challenges and Opportunities. And the title of the announcement for COFO was Shaping a New Agenda for Forests. And my interest and involvement in the issue of forestry and agriculture started then, because as you see on the screen, the main driver of deforestation is agriculture. And as forests striving for sustainable forest management, I read the SOFO on forestry and agriculture, and my observation was, when we do nothing, forest deforestation will continue. And well, when you see the figures here, the annual loss nowadays, according to the Forest Resource Assessment, is 10 million hectares per year. By 2050, there will be 2 billion more people on our planet than there are today, and the total global food demand is expected to increase by 35 to 56% between 2010 and 2050. And today's agriculture, how we have organized it now, cannot meet that need. And what I already said, almost 90% of deforestation is caused by conversion of forest into agricultural land. Well, when we look at the global land use, which is the next slide, we see that 50% of habitable land is used for agriculture and 37% for forest. So expanding agricultural land can only be at the cost of forests. You see that through increasing food production seems only possible by expanding agricultural land at the cost of forest. And how prevent this? Increase agriculture productivity, or do we have innovative agriculture, consume less, avoid food loss and waste? Well, at least we are confronted with the challenge to manage forests sustainably amid increasing food demand, while at the same time we have a climate crisis, a biodiversity crisis, and also fresh water scarcity. And when we see the actors, that about 1/3 of the world food in value terms is produced by farm and farmer producer organizations. And of course all the others, smallholders, women and men. And they are actually the key agents for delivering climate resilient landscapes. Well, on the next slide, we are confronted with the dilemma of choosing between saving forest and food should not lead to blaming agriculture. Let's find a solution. Let's find synergies. Agriculture needs forest for temperate climate, tempering climate, avoiding soil erosion and regulating water. And of course, we need sustainable food production that will not be at the cost of forest. So we started an initiative, and an initiative with the Farm and Farm Facility, a bank in the Netherlands, and also a research institute, and with several partners which seek to provide country-level solutions to ensure food security and strong livelihoods while maintaining forest and biodiversity. And our initiative focused on the main item, which is also part of the SOFA of today, which is, the title is Pathways for a Green Recovery. And one key element I like to focus on is how to increase investment. It has already been said in some of the other presentations. And how can we also attract private money to scale up the actions? So we did some pilot work in Ghana, Kenya and Zambia with forest and farm producer organizations through the Forest and Farm Facility to develop portfolios of bankable business plans around baskets of products that support food security and sustain forest. We also commissioned a consultant, Lady Agri, impact assessment. It is a hub network of international and African professionals supporting women agri-entrepreneurs in Africa and small island developing state. And they supported those forest and farm producer members in developing these business cases because they have so many experience already. And on the same time, they built capacity and strengthening the financial literacy of the business case owners. Well, then the last part, the key findings, our preliminary key findings, we are definitely continuous with this, is that the ability of banks need to be strengthened, how to deal with FFPOs. They don't speak the language of FFPOs. They don't know that you need suddenly quite a lot of money to buy fertilizers or buy your seed. And also how to deal with risk in the agroforestry and agriculture sector. The weather can change, you can have confronted with droughts. FFPOs have a kind of financial literacy that need to be improved in order to interact with financial organizations, as has already also been said. Well, and an interesting thing is also, and that has already been said by Duncan, that FFPOs are actually the missing middle. They have often not a legal status, they have what I said, they have no financial literacy, but maybe for banks as well as FFPOs, it might be lowering the first stepping stone for both sides, for instance, by identify a mechanism to support forest and farm producer organizations, for instance, with their first loan, in order to create their own bankable history. Now they have no bankable history, so they have no track record, so they can't get money. That would be a first step. And secondly, the creation of a subnational hub or platform composed of banks, FFPOs, entrepreneurs, and knowledge agencies would enhance cross-actor learning and the identifications of lessons learned, with a view to improve mutual understanding and cooperation. Private investments are crucial, jointly with public money, of course. It could be from national governments, could be ODA or other money from public organizations. And it's not only about markets. Actually, those farmers produce also global public goods like a climate mitigation, biodiversity, preservation and restoration. And yes, that are at least the main global goods. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Rob. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for highlighting the importance and the role of forest and farm producer organizations, and also for highlighting this issue of the first loan, having the ability to develop a track record, of dealing with financial institutions, which is very often a very difficult first hurdle to overcome, and what can be done about it. Now, the next speaker joins us from Australia. David Brandt. He is the Chief Executive Officer of New Forests. And we are happy to have you with us, David. Thank you for accepting our invitation. And David is going to share the perspective of a forestry company who has been successful not only mobilizing investments, but also in working with small producers. So, David, you have the floor.
Thank you, Marco. Good to be with you, and great to be with the other panelists here this evening. So what I'll talk about really is the perspective of an investment business and how we seek to promote sustainability and engagement with communities where we operate. Just quickly, New Forest is an investment management business, so we operate by raising capital from primarily institutional investors like pension funds and insurance companies and deploying that into forestry and land use assets. We were founded in 2005 in Sydney, and we've expanded now to operate across Australia, New Zealand, North America, Southeast Asia, and Africa. We really have three key themes in terms of our investing in forestry and land use. The first is, trying to promote and support the transition to a circular bioeconomy. The second is trying to support and promote the role of forest and land use as a natural climate solution. And thirdly is to try to create shared value with the communities where we operate. And I'll focus on that third objective in my short remarks this evening. So as an investor that operates internationally, I think, I think firstly, investment internationally is a privilege. It's not a right. And if you don't support the communities where you operate, if you don't support rural landowners, and if you don't work with local businesses, then you really won't have a license to operate. So, it's an imperative to investors like ourselves that we do engage to the degree we can with local communities to ensure that we create benefits both to the communities as well as to the investors that we serve as investment management business. So in our business, we have a number of activities that we've undertaken, and I thought I would just quickly give some examples, and then we can come back to it during the discussion. But I'll start with Tasmania, which is an area that has a strong forestry sector, but also a strong farming sector. And we've launched a program that we call Active Acre. It's a $50 million investment program. And we work with the farmers to identify areas of farms that maybe aren't making a profit from cropping or grazing. And we lease that land and plant it up with trees. And we pay a steady lease rate. So the farmer gets a diversification of income and a total increase in the total revenue from the farm. And in designing that program, we actually talked to 50 different farmers and then had a workshop where we co-created the program so that the farmers designed it and then we implemented it. And that's been very successful. We now, I think, have launched it in July. We already have 1,000 hectares signed up that will be both reforested for commercial timber production, but also in some cases for restoring natural vegetation. Another example, in the United States, we launched a program about 11 years ago called Forest Carbon Partners. And we worked with a large number, now about 24 Native American tribes, family forest areas, community forests, and non-governmental organizations to support the transition of forests into conservation management and then to develop forest carbon projects over those areas. And now we've delivered something like $200 million of revenue to these indigenous communities and rural community forests, often to communities that are living below the poverty line. So it's been quite a significant demonstration of how we can monetize improved forest conservation. In Laos, we have a program where we operate about a 14,000 hectare core forestry plantation, but we've signed up hundreds of local farmers. We provide them free seedlings. They plant the trees and manage them. And we will harvest their trees alongside ours, and they'll get the full market price for those trees. And given that these trees take 6, 7, 8 years to grow, it's almost like a pension fund for the farmers, where they have this kind of standing stock of value that's equal to 3 or 4 years of their normal income. And we've also put in place the processing facility and so on, so that we've lifted the value for ourselves and for those outgrowers. Our new Asian fund is interesting in that it's structured as what we call a blended finance structure. So we have a Class A and a Class B investor pool. The Class A are relatively conventional investors, pension funds, and, sovereign wealth funds, and so on. And the Class B are impact investors who have about half of the capital that they contribute to the fund directed towards community development projects, biodiversity enhancement, and climate mitigation activities. So we can literally supercharge the sustainability of the overall investment portfolio by creating this blended finance structure. And then lastly, our most recent initiative is we're launching, I think in the next week or so, a new African forestry impact platform. We've built a team out in Nairobi in Kenya, and this will have a core, again, open-ended fund. So it has it's permanent capital, which means we can continue to build the investment program over many decades. And it will consolidate some commercial forestry and then link with initiatives that will undertake forest restoration, forest conservation, and community forestry and outgrower programs. So, you know, I guess what we see is that we need a transition to sustainable land use. I think everyone has recognized that here today. We need to stop degradation of natural ecosystems. We need to restore degraded areas. We need to operate forest and land use on a sustainable basis. And we hope as investors that we can do that in a way that's a win-win for our clients and for the communities where we operate. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. Thank you for this intervention. I took note of one of your comments that international investments is a privilege, not a right. I really resonated with that. And thank you also for sharing some of your very interesting initiatives that you are preparing and implementing in Tasmania, in Africa, and other places. Thank you so much. I hope you can stay on for the panel discussion in a few minutes. I was just alerted that we are a few minutes late. We had to start already 10 minutes delayed, so I asked the speakers if they can extend their stay until at least 1 o'clock. I think we have the support of our technical team here. As a next speaker, we have Martin Yescas. I hope I pronounce your name well. Martin is General Director of Projects with External Financing and International Cooperation at the Ministry of Environment and Sustainable Development of Argentina. So, and Martin, will you speak in Spanish or English?
Spanish.
Okay. As you wish. Okay, so we will have the same support from Francisca after. Thank you. Martin.
Thank you all. Good morning, good afternoon. In the interest of time, I will speak in English. So right. Take a rest. Well, thank you again for inviting me to this very important panel. I will tell you about the experience of Argentina in the result-based payment project with the TCF. We're working closely with FAO. Those funds will come for the results obtained in 2014-2016. So at this point, I would like to say that reaching that goal was not magic. We didn't start it from ground, from zero. We had the law, the forest law. That was our baseline. So thank you for the implementation, for the policies implemented by that law. We reached the goal of passing that project. In another order of things, I think I need to tell you about something of my country, because Argentina is a federal country. So we faced some issues at the beginning of this project. According to our constitution, the reform of the constitution in 1994 established that the natural resources belong to the provinces. So first, we need the approval of all the provinces of the country. We went to the COFEMA, which is an institution that gathers all the environmental authorities of the country, and fortunately those officers declare the project of federal interest. So first we need the political support of the initiative. Then we faced another big issue that all of you know, the COVID-19. So during the consultations we were locked down. So we made a lot of consultation virtually with local communities, indigenous people. There was members of our teams traveling abroad with the masks, and was very challenging. So in the second place, we received the support of the local indigenous people and the science and the civil society. And third, our national director of forest performed an economic, social and environmental analysis to set the parameters to the distribution of the funds. As you can see in the image, I will go further in that in a moment. But as a result of those analyses of the very actors of the Forest Management Directorate of our ministry, we reach a project of $82 million. It's a huge amount of money. Nevertheless, we presented many more reductions to the UNFCCC. So we were told to cut the project in half, but we decided to keep those 27% of investment in community plans. That's the most important thing. So I would say that the most important part of this is that money will go to the ground for the people within the forest. And actually, around 80% of the project will be implemented in the ground. So that's the most important part, I think. We divided the project in 4 different components. The component A is the community plans component and the basin management program. It's around 44% of the initiative. Then we have the livestock management with integrated forest. I will go further in that point. Then the fire management program. And then we have another very important point. It's the D point. It's another investments, but that includes the rural women's program, the MRB system, the regulation analysis, and research and development. Now going into that detail, how we set that division. First, the community plans. Thank you for going. You can also change yourself. Yeah. Good. How we set that distribution of funds. For the community plans, we first analyzed the geographical distribution of the local communities. By the way, 55% of the rural population of the country lives within the forest, and around 66% of the communities and indigenous peoples lives within the forest as well. And also, we analyze the unsatisfied basic needs of the people. That is why maybe you can see very in the north part of the country is the bluest part of the benefit sharing of the project. And then in the livestock management program and also the fire management program, we took the drivers of deforestation. As you can see, the fires are more heavy in the south, so the fire management program is set in the provinces, especially in the provinces of the south. And then when cattle raising is a problem, you have the MBGI programs in the north, especially in Chaco, Santiago del Estero, and Corrientes. And then the basin plan, we perform analysis and industrial and economic analysis of the value chain of the forest industry.
So close in 30 seconds.
30 seconds. Okay, well, we are doing the final arrangements of the project this year, but I'm pretty sure next year the project will take off.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing the experience of Argentina and what it took to really put this REDD+ project together. We now have two speakers who will offer the perspective of multilateral agencies, the Green Climate Fund and the Global Environmental Facility. Let me briefly introduce Petteri Vuorinen, who is a senior forest and land use specialist with the Green Climate Fund, and who's going to share with us some tips on how to approach funds like the Green Climate Fund. Petteri, you have the floor. Okay, we have a video, a short video. We can start with that. Thank you.
So these bio-businesses are structured under different value chains, and these value chains can range from non-timber forest products to reforestation with native species, sustainable aquaculture, nature-led and community-led tourism, and some other activities that are actually consistent with activities that keep the Amazon forest standing. Commonly, these bio-businesses are perceived by private investors as having a high risk profile. So the GCF is providing grants, equity, and loans to overcome these financial barriers and these market failures to catalyze and to foster the participation of private investors in bio-businesses in the Amazon basin.
Thank you.
Thank you. So that gave a little bit of flavor what Green Climate Fund, what kind of projects Green Climate Fund is supporting. So our organization is relatively small, relatively new, based in South Korea. We have been operational just for 5-6 years, but we are the world's biggest fund dedicated on climate action. And at the moment, our portfolio is roughly $46 billion of approved activity projects around the world. And when it comes to Indigenous peoples and Green Climate Fund, we have our policy in place and we have our advisory group. But what is important is that we don't have a single project yet solely dedicated to Indigenous people. So that's why I'm talking about this topic, because it's going to be up and coming priority sector for us in the forestry and land use sector. And we have some components in our projects. So like this video clip showed, there's a lot of work done with the Indigenous peoples. We have similar project for Sub-Saharan Africa, country projects in Laos and Indonesia, similar type. but in smaller scale. But now, what is the important news for you is that we are really keen on supporting these activities and projects, and we are seeking for project ideas from our partners and from the countries. And I have a list of a few themes or topics, these what we might be interested in funding in the projects. The first is demarcation and effective protection of indigenous areas, and this could be even possibly linked to indigenous carbon markets. So this is, of course, the challenges here that demarcation of the indigenous lands can cause some conflicts, and not all the indigenous groups are interested in joining carbon markets. So there needs to be a very careful assessment of the situation in the country, what can be done. Other one is similar to this Amazon example, establishing funds and facilities for indigenous livelihoods and green businesses. And there the challenge might be that there are already some funds and facilities in place, and we don't want to have overlapping on competing facilities and funds to be established. We want them to be complementary. So again, there we ask you to look what is possible, what is already in place in the countries. Third theme, which we might be interested in funding, relates to enhancement of the climate change resilience of the IP people through education and access to health services. And of course here, this is also a very culturally sensitive topic. We don't want to cause acculturation. So it has to be very carefully assessed what can be done, and the approaches have to be just done right. Fourth theme is related to use of the traditional knowledge and their experiences. Is it then, and sharing these experiences inside the country, between the countries, especially related to the pastoral systems, knowledge of the medical plants. Of course, there need to be, again, careful that not all the indigenous peoples are keen on sharing their expertise and know-how with the private sector actors. So those are the kind of ideas what we at the GCF might be interested funding in the future, and we are looking for some good project ideas from our partners and member countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Petteri. Very, very useful to know what is the thinking of the Green Climate Fund in terms of priorities and themes moving forward. I think we all took notes of this. The next speaker is Pascal Martinez. Pascal is a climate change specialist with the Global Environmental Facility, and he's also going to share some thoughts with us on issues, lessons, prospects to scale up financing for forest action and climate. Pascal, you have the floor. Pascal, you can do your own slide moving.
I don't need this. Okay, c'est bien. Sorry. Hi everyone. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's actually a critical aspect of our job, because we, as a GEF, we receive quite significant funding from the international community. But at the end of the day, it has to reach the people who really need them, and also to finally to get the result that we are expecting. And as Rob mentioned, the situation is quite terrible. With your slide with the numbers, we will not get there. Business as usual, so something must happen. So yeah, I just wanted to first begin with a brief indication or information of what we are and how we work. So we are a global partnership. We work with 18 implementing agencies. Concretely, the project that we support, we finance, are elaborated by these agencies. This would be our accredited agencies, no? So this is very important to have these agencies in mind, because if you want to work with GEF resources, you need to work with these agencies. And at the end of the day, our goal, our overarching goal is to implement the environmental agreement, the global environmental agreement, and particularly, which is related to the topic of the day, particularly the Rio Conventions. So this is our goal. And now where we are, we have been 30 years experience, and we are just beginning a new cycle from the 1st of July with significant increase of resources, $5.3 billion over the next 4 years. It's important to know that these resources are allocated to the countries, and it is a country-driven process. The countries choose what they want to do with the resources we allocate to them. And this relates also to what has been said by the colleagues from Argentina. It was very important what you mentioned, that it was a decision from your country to allocate the money for a specific purpose, and in this case for the local stakeholders. And it is very important to have in mind that it's also a country-driven process, not only the consequences of the rules or the programming direction that we can elaborate from the GEF side. So in the new cycle, we have a series of activities that we funded. We have traditional activities that we fund under what we call the focal areas: biodiversity, climate change, land degradation. So one country can finance a specific project to meet these specific objectives. But more importantly, we have these integrated programs, 11 integrated programs. I put here in red the ones who are very relevant for the discussion of today: food systems, ecosystem restoration, one Amazon Congo and critical forest biomes, another one on wildlife conservation for development. I would like to just react to the presentation we just had from the GCF. He mentioned this $279 million of bioeconomy for the Amazon. We have also a big, an important program for the Amazon, and also the GCF funds are matched with, I think it's $300 million from the Inter-American Development Bank. So if we put all the resources together, we have a significant program for the Amazon. So it's very important to be able to connect the dots. We know the problems. We have the financial resources. I heard today many good examples of activities that we heard from different countries. So we need to work together, because I think it's like this we would have a much bigger impact. And also, because we are speaking about the communities, local communities, we have specific programs targeted for communities, in addition to this thematic program I mentioned earlier. So how we approach this topic, so it's through projects and programs. As I said earlier, we have specific programs, as I said also, one which is called a flagship program of the GEF, the Small Grant Program. We provide finance directly to the local people to implement to create or develop their own business. We have also recently approved at the beginning of 2022 an inclusive conservation initiative program, which is $22 million from the GEF plus $90 million from other partners. So it's a quite big program that is directly targeted to indigenous people and local communities to create their own governance, their own project, and monitor their project. So the money goes directly to them. And also we promote the integration, because we need to work together and across silos. And the value chains in this regard is very important, and it's also an important focus for the GEF. I mentioned numbers, roughly on average for each dollar from the GEF, we succeed to have more or less $6-7 of co-financing, so it's much bigger even of what the number I can mention. And also this is transversal cross-cutting. We promote inclusiveness in all our projects and programs. So and some key elements that we look at seriously, it's capacity building in terms of practices, in terms of forest, in terms of agriculture and forest, in terms of finance also. We mentioned this middle area that we heard today that needs to be addressed between the one who can provide finance and the one who could receive it, but the dialogue is not, they don't speak the same language. So this kind of capacity building also we are looking for. The policy coherence is very critical, and this is what I mentioned with Argentina. It's very important that all the objectives are aligned. We cannot work on one direction while other national agencies are working in other directions. I mentioned the value chains. Empowering indigenous people and local communities are very also important. Land rights, land tenure and rights are very important if you want them to be able to be more empowered. We look systematically alternative livelihoods because it's a key driver of environmental degradation. The valuation of nature also is important, and we promote payment for ecosystem services when it is possible. And we heard about REDD+. REDD+ is one example, for instance, that can be used in this regard. Also, we have innovative finance in our strategy. We heard also today the importance of blended finance, and this is a specific program of the GEF, and most of the projects that are submitted to the GEF in terms of blended finance are in the agriculture and forest sectors. So we have plenty of tools that we propose, and it's also a country-driven process. So it's very important that agencies, GEF agencies, the countries, and us, we can work together so that we can provide, make our objectives match the reality of the countries with all the set of tools that we have and possibilities of financing. And now that we are beginning a new cycle, we are promoting this new strategy all over the world with many workshops and events. We are at the very beginning of GEF 8, so it's time we are open for business, if I may conclude like this. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Pascal. Very, very good to hear about this, about all the tools, and also your point you made about so many resources going to maybe some similar areas, and it's important to connect the dots and really explore all the possible synergies. We have one last speaker who joins us virtually, Stéphane Haller. Stéphane, welcome. I can see you on the screen. Excellent. Stéphane is a CEO and founder of Reforest Action. He will share with us how Reforest Action is working to enhance the engagement and leveraging finance to local communities and indigenous people. Stéphane, you have the floor.
Thank you very much for inviting me to this very interesting session. So yes, I'm the founder of Reforest Action, which is a company dedicated on reforestation and agroforestry projects. And our goal is to help local organizations to scale their projects so they can deliver bigger impact on biodiversity, climate, but also social development. And today we are, we've been supporting projects since 2010, 1,300 projects in 42 countries, and projects of all sizes. And what happens today is that we see the world shifting to carbon finance, very much so. For the last couple of years, the carbon market has been driving the investment in forests and agroforestry, which is a very good news because it helps scaling projects. And for instance, our average projects were 300 hectares big in average, and today they are 5,000 hectares big in average. So it's very good for impact, but it presents quite of a challenge as well, because if a project owner wants to develop his own project and wants to access the carbon finance, he needs to scale his project to 1,000 hectares minimum. Below this number, there is no access to the carbon market today, or it's very challenging and difficult. So our job is to help them scaling to access the carbon market, but it can be quite challenging for some of them because they are not organized to scale. So we provide technical expertise, we provide funds, we provide impact monitoring as well. But there is still a gap. And what we're asking project owners on the ground is to adapt their project to the funds, whereas we should adapt the funds to the projects, as far as I'm concerned. We should be more creative on how to fund the small projects, because today we already face a shortage in terms of carbon projects. I think I've seen the number of $2.4 billion being allocated to projects this year. And we know that we need to reach $4.7 trillion on forest restoration and creation in the coming decades if we want the forest to play a key role in climate. So the numbers will go much higher than today, but there is already a shortage in terms of carbon projects. And my view is that we need together to create a generation of reforestation entrepreneurs who can create their own project, small scale to start with, so they can, they can learn on how to implement a reforestation projects, but then helping them to scale towards carbon projects. So we need to be more innovative on the finance aspects, so we can support small projects where all the funds go to the big projects. But that's my challenge today, and that's my invitation to the finance market to help us being more innovative and supporting better the project owners. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Stefan, very much for this, first of all, for keeping the time, but also for highlighting issues that I think are pertinent, not just for the carbon finance, but for finance in general, the issue of scale, especially, and the issue of whether our projects to adapt to the funds, or should fund also kind of come towards the projects. Anyway, I hope you can stay with us for the panel discussion. We now move to the next section of the event, and for this I invite Lucio Santos, my colleague, to take my place and moderate the panel discussion. Lucio, you have the floor now.
Thank you, Marco. What an interesting and diverse point of views and experiences shared by our distinguished panelists. We will continue with the panel that will last about 20 minutes, and there will be some time for the audience and at the end to ask questions. So for those in streaming, please, if possible, share also your questions in the chat. I know your responses and insights will inspire our audience, that will take away good insights and good ideas to increase and direct finance where it matters. So I will start. Duncan, you have showed a very comprehensive stage setting of the importance of sustainable finance and inclusive models to address global challenges. And did you mention an example of Vietnam? Could you give us some other examples of countries that could share lessons learned for other countries that would like to implement this kind of inclusive model approaches?
Thank you. Yes. I mean, I think all of the partner countries where we're working in the Forest Farm facility have some examples of people getting access to finance, and it varies hugely in scale. So at one end, you have many local groups who are using things like village savings and loans associations to generate funds that can be loaned for investing in very small scale activities and processing equipment. And at the more advanced scales of organization, you have local organizations that have even become credit unions and banks, and they've mobilized profits from several different sources of revenue. So one that we've commented on a couple of times is in Guatemala, where Feda Corvera, who are a cardamom, cocoa, coffee producing association, have generated sufficient profits from those businesses to then be able to invest in timber production, which they got to later. And those sorts of examples often, they require supportive banks who don't regard them as high risk, and they require business partners who are patient and who want to secure long-term sources of product for themselves. And I see that as a real window of opportunity. So I see there's a need for enabling investment that builds the capability of these organizations, doesn't expect a financial return, and then linking to asset investors, people who want to put in money that does need a return, and of the sort that David Brand was talking about. And if we can get that blend of enabling investment to achieve scale, which is always a barrier for financing, people with money want a return at scale generally. So there's quite a lot of work to achieve that scale and organization and professionalism. Financiers will rarely pay for that. So you need to blend this enabling investment coming from groups like GCF and GEF with then asset investment that's coming from the market in conventional ways.
Okay, thank you, Duncan. And I will remind our distinguished panelists we have 2 minutes about for this section of the event. But thank you very much, Duncan, for your insights and good examples. Unfortunately, Gustavo had to rush to move to another city in Mexico, so he's expressed his apologizes. But only I want to say that it's very encouraging to see the progress to establish the financial mechanism managed directly by indigenous people and local communities. And I want to pass to Rob. Rob, you have raised the potential of the forest and farm producer organization to leverage investment and attract private money to scale up action. How could governments support to create enabling activities to harness this potential of forest and farm producer organizations?
Well, the problem with investments is by farm and farm producer organizations, that was already said, that they have no track record, etc. And banks are very reluctant to invest in a partner they don't know. And well, it's not only about the partner, it's also about the project. And what governments could do, whether it's in my country or in the countries where those FFPOs are, is reducing the risk for the bank, so that the bank is willing to invest in those activities. But what we also see is that forest and farm producer organizations, but not only them, but all the smallholders, they also take care of the environment when they produce sustainably. And actually what I said, they produce also public goods. And that should be recognized. And we talked earlier about carbon credits, which is an award for climate mitigation. And that money should also go to those organizations, the farmer producer organizations, so that the projects and the investment they do can really be profitable on the long term. But we are also talking about biodiversity. And we know that the enormous value of biodiversity, and biodiversity is decreasing. We don't feel it like climate. It is a sneaky crisis, but biodiversity is the basis of our food system. So one way or another, we should also reward for those who preserve and restore biodiversity. And I think that is a role for the government to arrange these things. That can't do an individual company or a private person, can't arrange that at its own.
Thank you, Rob. It seems really an approach of partnership between governments, stakeholders, including forest and farm production organizations and local actors at the national level to success in this process. Thank you very much. I pass now to Martin. Thank you very much, Martin, because you had shared a nice experience on benefit sharing system that have challenging countries for the implementation, and you showed how the results-based payment is supporting this process. But now we have mentioned the issue of sustainable finance. So my question for you is, what innovative instruments Argentina is considering or implementing to keep sustainable finance of the benefit distribution system once the results-based payments are exhausted?
Thank you, Lucio, for your question. First, sometimes the word innovative is very hard to solve that issue because the gunpowder was already invented. But I will focus on the 4 components. The component C, the fire management, we created a trust. 0.3% of every insurance policy flows directly straight to that trust. So that gives us predictability in the income. Within the framework of that trust, now we are working with the Latin American Development Bank, a loan operation of $50 million. So the component C is covered. And component A, B, and D, we have the trust, the forest trust, and we're planning to finance all the activities throughout that trust. We are thinking about issuing a green bond as well, because we have that chance. And also we are working, or we started conversations with a pension fund, a national pension fund, which is quite big, to establish a specific fund for forest activities. So I think those 3 options are the ones that will give the project the life in the future.
Okay, thank you very much, Martin. Really challenging also this issue of sustainability. Let's move on now with the international organizations, and I will start with Petteri. What are the thematic and geographical components looking in the short future prioritized by GCF, and based on good examples of projects, what are the key elements for a successful GCF project?
Okay, thank you for the question. I could lecture a day about this topic, but let's try to squeeze it in 2 minutes. Okay. Priority areas at the moment for GCF on the land use sector is fires, indigenous people, health. So if you can build projects linking those 3, excellent, ticking a lot of boxes in our books. We are concentrating on Africa, the least developed countries, the small island nations, but geographically we have at the moment a bit of hole in Central Asia. So we are looking forward for a project filling that gap. And then, key components, maybe I would say it the other way around. Usually when I review in these concept notes coming in, there are 3 main weaknesses in them where I would like you to pay attention. So, Green Climate Fund is a climate fund, not development fund. So it's a climate first. What is the climate problem in the country? What are the hazards? And then comes the project, how the project is tackling those hazards. Quite often I receive projects, somebody wants to do something and then they start backtracing how I make this as a climate problem. It's the other way around. Other usual weakness in the project is that it's not linking to the past work in the country or other activities, other donors, what they are doing in the country. Bad example is country X is asking us $50 million for reforestation of certain area. Well, at the same time, their government is receiving 500 million from the ADP for the same job. Did you know about that? You need to explain me very carefully why do you need other 50 million from us if you have already funding for the same activity. Third, and maybe the trickiest bit, what is usually missing in the projects is what we call sustainability financial model or the exit strategy. What happens when the GCF funding finishes, when the project finishes, how the project activities are going to be continued after that. Bad example is that, yeah, we think about it later, or we ask you for more money. That goes to garbage bin. Good example would be, okay, we are going to reforest and manage certain forest area. We try to get it FSC certificate, and we have a pre-agreement with industrial company, IKEA, for example. For the next 10 years, they will going to purchase the raw material from this area, and with those profits, with that money, we are going to continue the management of this forest area. And then, if you allow, 1 minute. Now take your pens and papers ready. So, all our approved projects of GCF, they are on the website. The whole project document is there, almost 200 of them. Use those, read them. We have no problem whatsoever if you copy ideas from other countries and projects. You don't need to reinvent new things all the time. Just look what the others have been proposing. And now I give you 5 examples, so you don't need to review all the 200. In forestry sector, FP50, Bhutan for Life, have a look. FP 139, Ghana, share production, have a look. SAP 15, Cote d'Ivoire, coconut production. FP 117, sustainable forest management in northern Laos. And FP 132 is sustainable forest management in Georgia. I'm sure you will have some good ideas from those 5 projects. Use them, and then contact us if you have any questions. We are very happy to help you to develop these concept ideas to concept notes and further to the funding proposals. Thank you.
Thank you, Petteri. You have here some good examples of projects to provide these key elements to success with the GCF process. Pascal, effectively, the GEF has developed within each tools to support countries. Could you mention if some of them enable for the participation of a broad range of stakeholders, including indigenous people within a country?
Thank you very much, Lucio, for the question. First, I would like to react to my colleague from GCF, because actually I can see how close we are, because many of what he mentioned, I could have mentioned it also. So it's interesting to see some lessons he advises. I think it's valid also for the GEF regarding the objective, sustainability, and so on. No, on the specific, this question in particular, I didn't have time to develop before, but when I mentioned these small grant programs, within this program, there are specific provision for particular programs, sub-programs, targeting the local people and the indigenous people and local communities. One is what we call a CSO Challenge program. It's a program that will provide technical assistance specifically for innovation projects and targeting youth, women, and IPLC's entrepreneurs. So one specifically on innovation. So we take some kind of risk in this initiative. And another one is the micro, small, and medium-sized enterprise pilot. And this one is really to try to partner with microfinance institutions or eventually other intermediary financial institutions to mobilize microfinance or instruments to develop projects with local people. So one is focused on microfinance, but partnering with institutional finance institutions. So there are 2 specific examples that innovation that we proposed in GEF 8. And also, and this is very important, I mentioned it briefly in my conclusion, but you know, as we are now beginning a new cycle, we have a set of tools that we provide to countries to be able to program our resources. And this is what we call the country support program. And this country support program provide many different possibilities. Some are at national level, others are more specifically targeting the CSOs. There is one which is called building, a stakeholder empowerment series, which is really on specific issues to make stakeholders working together. So there is a set of tools that would be very long to list right now, but that's why it's so important at this moment that of the beginning of the new cycle for the GEF, that the stakeholders, any of them, farmer organization, CSO organization, whatever, IPLC organization, and also national institutions that can reach out to either the agencies that are GEF agencies, and also our entry point, which is a GEF focal point, and the contact information of these focal points are in our website. And these two entry points are very important. The one, the operational focal point, the national focal point, is the one who decides which project will be financed, and the other one is the one who will decide with whom and how we will work concretely. So these two entry points are very important at this right moment of the beginning of the cycle. And so on. And I will end like this, with this also, because I didn't mention it. When I mentioned the programs, in terms of innovations, these integrated programs include systematically a platform. And this is quite innovative because this platform tries to integrate all the different stakeholders. And here, specifically, the indigenous people, local communities, farmers, they have their entry point on this kind of platforms, and they need to know how to get there. But this is a very strong possibilities to reach out, to be able to have an influence on millions of people if we work with the right organization. So these platforms within these programs are also very important to have in mind, to work with, if we want to try to get more impact and help people on the ground more efficiently. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Petteri and Pascal, for your great points. I think it has been highlighted the catalytic role of international public finance to trigger scaling up finance. And I think this is a great transition to our next speakers, David and Stefan from private sector, who have shared the point of view of the private sector. So I imagine you have a smallholder organization in face of you, and I would like that you try to provide the ABC, the 3 key elements if this small organization would like to benefit from new forest or rainforest action investment.
Thank you, Lucio. It is on reforest action side of things. It's very straightforward. If you're a project owner and you need support in terms of technical support, financial support, you just need to reach out on the reforestaction.com website to register, and you've got an answer within a few days. The idea is to make it extremely straightforward for the project owners, so they don't spend time on paperwork, but more on the groundwork. And the set of criteria is, we really focus, as I said earlier, on multifunctional projects. So every single project needs to deliver a positive impact on climate, but also on biodiversity and on social impact. And what we are very keen on as well is to have projects that develop a sustainable value chain. Because I think it was mentioned earlier, what happens once the funds have been allocated and the projects have been developed, what happens next? And we take the opportunity to fund a project to develop a sustainable value chain. So the value chain can create incomes for the local populations and make the project sustainable. For instance, in Kenya, we've been running a project in Mount Kenya for the last couple of years. And today we're working on an avocado value chain. So the trees we've been planting with the local farmers can produce additional revenues and incomes for the communities, so they can keep the project running after the fundings.
Okay, thank you, Stefan. I was informed that David is not in the chat, but thank you very much for your great points. I think that we are well behind of the schedule, so I will thanks a lot all the great speakers and the audience for being part of this lively panel. So I would like to give an applause. Now it's time to come to the end, and I would like to invite to the podium my colleague Marco Boscolo, a finance specialist in the Sustainable Forestry Value Chain Innovation and Investment team of FAO, to make the closing remarks.
Thank you. Thank you. So Thais Linares Juvenal was supposed to close this, and I'm covering for her. She is still taken with COFO responsibilities. And I am in this very uncomfortable position to be between you and lunch. So I will try to be very, very quick. I wanted to say that for FAO, this event is really more like a stepping stone. It's a very important area of work for us. And I wanted to mention some important events that we are organizing together with partners that can help move this dialogue forward. The first one is an event actually that starts today in Mexico. It is the event that Gustavo is going to in Morelia, Michoacan. It's an event on exchange of knowledge on community-based mechanisms for territorial financing. It starts today. It lasts for a few days, and then representatives from this meeting will go to Washington, D.C., where they will meet some of the World Bank, IDB, and perhaps the Global Environmental Facility for another event called the Getting Finance to the Ground. It's an event, sets of meeting scheduled from the 12th to the 13th of October. It is an event co-organized with IUCN and also the Mesoamerican Alliance of People and Forests. I also want to mention the Restoration Initiative, another team also working here in FAO is quite active on this work on finance. They're organizing a knowledge sharing event, including finance topic, at a global event happening in Nairobi the second half of November. FAO is also proposing an event on finance for forests and agriculture at the COP27. And finally, I want to mention a regional exchange titled Unlocking Finance for Smallholder, Forest and Farm Producers, Lessons and Practices for Landscape Restoration and Sustainable Production, which is planned from the 28th of February to the 2nd of March next year in Nairobi, Kenya, together with ICRAF. And with this, I want to also echo Lucio in thanking all the speakers for the phenomenal interventions, very informative, very inspiring. And also I want to thank the team I work with, the Social Forestry, Value Chain Innovation and Investments, Forest and Farm Facility, the Red Plus team, and the Mesoamerican Alliance for People and Forests. Without them, this event would not have happened. So thank you very much.